Marcus Johnson sat in the back row of his sophomore math class, quietly solving equations while other students struggled with the basics. At 16, he had a natural gift for numbers that made complex problems seem simple to him. His worn textbook had dog-eared pages and pencil marks where he worked out extra problems just for fun. "Time's up. Pass your quizzes forward," Mr. Whitaker announced from the front of the classroom. Mr. Whitaker had taught advanced mathematics at Westside High School for over 20 years. With his pressed shirts, neatly combed gray hair, and wire-rimmed glasses, he looked exactly like what people expected a math teacher to look like. The students respected him because he had connections at the best colleges and wrote recommendation letters that actually got results. As papers moved to the front, Marcus noticed how Mr. Whitaker's eyes barely glanced at his work before moving on to the next student's paper. This happened every time. No matter how well Marcus did, Mr. Whitaker never seemed to notice. "Don't worry about it," his best friend Jamal said after class. "That old man doesn't see anybody who doesn't look like him." "I just want a fair chance," Marcus replied, stuffing his books into his backpack. At home that evening, Marcus sat at the small kitchen table doing homework while his mother prepared dinner. Their apartment wasn't big, but Ms. Johnson kept it spotless. She worked 2 jobs to support them since Marcus's father had left when he was just a baby. "How was school today?" she asked, stirring a pot of stew. "Same as always. Got an A on my English paper. Still invisible in math class." His mother wiped her hands on her apron and sat across from him. "Baby, you know you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. It's not fair, but that's how it is." "I know, Mom," Marcus sighed. "I just thought math would be different. Numbers don't care what color you are." "Teachers do, though," she said softly. "Don't you give up. Your brain is a gift." The next day, an announcement came over the school speaker system during homeroom. "Attention students. The district-wide mathematics competition will be held next Friday. Please see your math teachers for permission slips if you're interested in participating." Marcus's heart beat faster. This was his chance to prove himself. When he approached Mr. Whitaker's desk after class, the teacher looked surprised. "You want to enter the competition?" Mr. Whitaker asked, his eyebrows raised. "Yes, sir. I've been practicing with last year's problems." Mr. Whitaker hesitated, then handed him a form. "It's very advanced material. Don't be disappointed if you don't do well." Marcus took the paper, his determination growing stronger with each dismissive word. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best." For the next week, Marcus studied every night until his eyes burned. His mother brought him cups of hot chocolate and quiet encouragement. "Show them what you can do," she whispered before kissing his forehead goodnight. On competition day, Marcus sat among students from all 12 high schools in the district. Many came from wealthy neighborhoods and private schools. As the proctor distributed the test booklets, Marcus took a deep breath. This was his moment. 3 hours later, he handed in his completed test, confident in every answer. For once, his skill would speak for itself with no teacher bias in the way. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he walked out into the sunshine. He had no idea that this competition would change the course of his life, just not in the way he hoped. 1 week after the competition, Principal Roberts called an assembly to announce the district math competition results. The entire school gathered in the auditorium, a buzz of excitement filling the air. Marcus sat next to Jamal, trying to calm his nervous heartbeat. "And now," Principal Roberts said with a smile, "I'm proud to announce that the first-place winner of this year's district mathematics competition is from our very own West Side High, Marcus Johnson." The auditorium erupted in applause. Several students turned to look at Marcus with surprised expressions. He sat frozen in his seat until Jamal nudged him forward. "Go on, man. You did it." Marcus walked to the stage in a daze, shaking the principal's hand and accepting a small trophy. From the corner of his eye, you could see Mr. Whitaker sitting with the other teachers. The math teacher wasn't clapping. Instead, he stared at Marcus with narrowed eyes and a tight jaw. Later that afternoon, Marcus was called to Mr. Whitaker's classroom. He entered feeling proud, hoping the teacher would finally recognize his talent. Instead, he found Mr. Whitaker standing stiffly behind his desk, holding Marcus's competition paper. "Close the door," Mr. Whitaker said coldly. Marcus obeyed, confused by the teacher's tone. "You wanted to see me, sir." Mr. Whitaker slammed the test paper down on his desk. Do you want to explain this? Explain what, sir? I solved the problems. No one in this school has ever scored this high, Mr. Whittaker said. Especially not someone from your background. The words hit Marcus like a slap. What do you mean, my background? I'm not accusing you of anything, Mr. Whittaker said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply saying these results are suspicious. Marcus felt heat rising in his face. I didn't cheat, if that's what you're saying. Then explain how you solved problem 14. Mr. Whittaker pointed to a complex calculus question. This method isn't taught in our curriculum. I read ahead in the textbook, Marcus explained. And I found other approaches online. I can show you my work. It's too advanced, Mr. Whittaker interrupted. Too perfect. I've been teaching for 25 years. I know when something doesn't add up. By the end of the day, rumors spread through the school that Marcus had somehow cheated on the math competition. No one said exactly how he could have cheated on a test with strict proctors, but the whispers followed him down every hallway. Mom, he basically called me a cheater in front of everyone, Marcus explained that evening, pacing their small living room. He had no proof, but he made sure everyone heard. Ms. Johnson's eyes flashed with anger. That's not right. I'm going to talk to the principal tomorrow. The next morning, Marcus's mother arrived at school dressed in her best outfit, her back straight and her resolve firm. Principal Roberts listened politely but seemed uncomfortable. Mr. Whittaker is concerned about academic integrity, the principal explained. He's not officially accused Marcus of anything. Then why is my son being treated like he did something wrong? Ms. Johnson demanded. Marcus worked hard for that win. I understand your concern, Principal Roberts said, but Mr. Whittaker has been with us for many years. He has an excellent reputation. As they left the office, Marcus spotted Mr. Whittaker watching them from across the hallway. The teacher quickly turned away, but not before Marcus caught the look of disdain on his face. What happens now? Marcus asked his mother as they walked out of the school. Ms. Johnson squeezed his shoulder. Now we fight twice as hard. No one can take away what's in your mind, Marcus. No one. But even as she spoke, Marcus could feel his dream of academic success beginning to crack under the weight of unfair suspicion and prejudice. The weeks following the math competition should have been triumphant for Marcus. Instead, they marked the beginning of a calculated campaign against him. Mr. Whittaker never directly accused Marcus of cheating again, but his actions spoke louder than words. When junior year class selections came around, Marcus applied for advanced placement calculus. He met all the requirements. His grades were excellent despite Mr. Whittaker's increasingly harsh marking. Sorry, Johnson, the guidance counselor said, looking uncomfortable as she slid his rejected application across the desk. Mr. Whittaker didn't approve your recommendation. But why? Marcus asked, his voice cracking slightly. My grades qualify me. The counselor avoided his eyes. He feels you're not ready for that level of work. That same week, Marcus discovered he'd been removed from the list of candidates for the prestigious Summer Math Institute, a program that helped students from disadvantaged backgrounds connect with college recruiters. There must be some mistake, Marcus told the program coordinator over the phone. I submitted my application on time. I'm sorry, the woman said, but your math teacher indicated concerns about your academic character. We have limited spots and many qualified candidates. Marcus set the phone down gently, though he wanted to throw it against the wall. His mother found him later, shoulders slumped at the kitchen table. They're making sure no one believes in me, he said quietly. No matter what I do. Ms. Johnson called the school repeatedly, but each time she was told the same thing. Teacher recommendations were subjective, and Mr. Whittaker had the right to make his own professional judgments. In class, things got worse. When Marcus raised his hand, Mr. Whittaker called on other students. When he turned in perfect test papers, they came back with points deducted for unclear work or insufficient steps shown. Maybe I should just drop to regular math, Marcus told Jamal one day after receiving another C on work he knew was correct. That's what he wants, Jamal replied fiercely. Don't give him the satisfaction. But the damage was spreading beyond just math class. Other teachers, who had once praised Marcus's work, now looked at him differently. They'd heard whispers in the teacher's lounge. When group projects came up, students hesitated to partner with him. Nobody wants to work with the cheater, a student whispered loudly enough for Marcus to hear. His junior year grades began to slip. Not dramatically, but enough to matter for college applications. The straight A student became a B student, then a mix of Bs and Cs. Each poor grade felt like another brick in a wall being built between Marcus and his future. One afternoon, Marcus stayed after school to work in the library. Passing by the teacher's lounge, he overheard Mr. Whittaker's voice. Some students simply don't have the right background for academic success, the math teacher was saying. It's a disservice to push them toward colleges where they won't flourish. Johnson is better suited for a technical school, perhaps. Marcus froze, blood rushing in his ears. The casual way Mr. Whittaker dismissed his potential hurt more than any failed test. That evening, Marcus sat with his mother at their kitchen table, college brochures spread before them. The glossy images of ivy-covered buildings and smiling students seemed to mock him. These schools want students with perfect records, Marcus said, pushing a brochure away. And recommendations from teachers. I don't have either anymore. Ms. Johnson took his hand. There are other paths, baby. Other schools. We'll find a way. It's not fair, Marcus whispered. I did everything right. Life isn't fair, his mother said softly. But you're strong, Marcus, stronger than his hatred. We just need to find another way forward. Marcus nodded, but inside he felt something hardening, a determination born from injustice. Mr. Whittaker had stolen his present, but Marcus wouldn't let him take his future too. Senior year arrived with a heaviness Marcus hadn't expected. The damage from Mr. Whittaker's campaign had spread like poison through his academic record. When college application season began, Marcus stared at the forms with a growing sense of dread. You need to list your math teacher as a reference, Ms. Johnson pointed out one evening as they sat at their small kitchen table surrounded by applications. Marcus shook his head. Mr. Whittaker would never write me a good recommendation. What about your other teachers? They all talk to each other, Mom. Most of them believe in now. Marcus pushed the application away. Maybe college isn't for me. His mother's hand came down hard on the table. Don't you dare say that, not after everything we've been through. The next day, Marcus approached his physics teacher, Mr. Delgado, who had always been fair to him. Sir, I was wondering if you might write a recommendation for my college applications. Mr. Delgado looked uncomfortable. I heard there were some issues with your math work. That's not true, Marcus said, his voice tight. Mr. Whittaker has had it out for me since the competition. The physics teacher sighed. Look, Marcus, I believe you're a good student, but this is a small school, and Mr. Whittaker has been here for decades. His opinion carries weight. So that's it. One teacher decides my whole future? I'll write you a recommendation, Mr. Delgado said finally, but I can't make any promises about how strong it will be. By December, Marcus had applied to 12 colleges, far fewer than he once dreamed of. The prestigious universities were no longer options without the right advanced classes and stellar recommendations. Instead, he focused on state schools and smaller colleges with less competitive admissions. On a cold January morning, Marcus checked the mail and found an envelope from State University. His hands trembled as he opened it. We regret to inform you. The rejection felt like a physical blow. Over the next weeks, similar letters arrived. Some offered weightless positions, but none of his top choices accepted him. Finally, Central Community College sent an acceptance letter. It wasn't what he had worked for all these years, but it was something. It's just a detour, his mother insisted, holding him in a fierce hug. You'll transfer to a university after 2 years. Graduation day should have been triumphant. Instead, Marcus felt hollow as he crossed the stage to receive his diploma. Mr. Whittaker sat with the other teachers, his expression smug as he gave Marcus a curt nod. That summer, Marcus took a job at the local electronics store to save money for community college. His former classmates posted excited updates about their upcoming freshman years at prestigious universities. Marcus stopped checking social media. You should file a formal complaint, Jamal insisted during one of their meetings before he left for college. What Whittaker did was discrimination. With what proof? Marcus asked bitterly. It would be my word against his, and he's already won. August arrived, bringing move-in days and new student orientations. While others packed their cars for dormitory life, Marcus prepared for classes at Central Community College while living at home. His first day on campus, Marcus sat in the back row of college algebra, a class he could have taught himself. The professor, Dr. Chen, looked out at the class with sharp, observant eyes. Mathematics is not just about finding the right answer, she said. It's about discovering the path to that answer. Sometimes, the most valuable journeys are the ones with unexpected detours. Marcus looked up, something stirring inside him for the first time in months. After class, he approached Dr. Chen's desk. I actually studied calculus in high school, he admitted. But some things happened, and I ended up here instead of university. Dr. Chen tilted her head. Sometimes setbacks are actually setups for comebacks, Mr. Johnson. Tell me more about your mathematics background. As Marcus began to explain, he felt a small spark reignite, one that Mr. Whittaker had nearly extinguished, but hadn't quite managed to destroy completely. Dr. Chen became the mentor Marcus had always needed. After their first meeting, she arranged for him to take a special assessment test. Marcus scored so high that she immediately moved him into her advanced mathematics section. You have remarkable talent, she told him after reviewing his work. What happened at your high school was a tragedy. For the first time, Marcus shared the full story of Mr. Whittaker's campaign against him. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. Unfortunately, what you experienced isn't unique, she said when he finished. But we can use this setback as fuel for your comeback. Under Dr. Chen's guidance, Marcus flourished at Central Community College. He took extra classes each semester, working nights and weekends at the electronics store to pay for them. His mother worried about his heavy schedule. I'm making up for lost time, he explained, exhausted but determined. On rare free evenings, Marcus tutored other students in the math lab. He discovered he had a gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms. The students he helped began to seek him out specifically. You should consider teaching someday, Dr. Chen suggested after observing one of his tutoring sessions. Marcus shook his head. I don't think I could work in a system that failed me so badly. Then perhaps you should change the system, she replied. At the end of his first year, Dr. Chen called Marcus into her office. A distinguished-looking man in a suit was waiting there. Marcus, this is Dr. Williams from State University's Mathematics Department, she said. I've shown him some of your work. Dr. Williams extended his hand. Dr. Chen tells me you're something of a prodigy. We'd like to discuss transfer opportunities for next fall. Marcus blinked in surprise. State University rejected my application last year. Yes, Dr. Williams nodded. I reviewed your file. The discrepancy between your test scores and teacher recommendations raised questions, but your work here speaks for itself. That evening, Marcus called his mother with the news. They're offering me a partial scholarship if I transfer next year. Ms. Johnson's voice cracked with emotion. I always knew you'd find your way. During his final semester at Central, Marcus took an Introduction to Computer Science course. The logical problem-solving clicked with his mathematical mind immediately. When he mentioned his interest to Dr. Chen, she arranged a meeting with the Computer Science Department at State University. They work closely with the Math Department on algorithm development, she explained. You could double major. Marcus's transfer to State University happened without fanfare. He moved into a small apartment near campus, taking evening shifts at the university computer lab to help cover expenses. The work was easier than the electronics store, and it gave him access to powerful computers for his projects. His classes were challenging but exhilarating. For the first time since the math competition in high school, Marcus felt truly engaged with learning again. His professors noted his unusual approach to problems, a creativity born from having to find his own path forward. During his junior year, Marcus developed an algorithm for his computer science project that caught his professor's attention. This is graduate-level work, Professor Garcia told him, reviewing his code. Have you considered continuing your education after your bachelor's degree? The idea of pursuing a master's degree had never occurred to Marcus. College itself had seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. I don't know if I can afford more school, he admitted. There are fellowships for students with your abilities, Professor Garcia said, and connections to the tech industry. Your algorithm has practical applications that companies would pay for. For the first time, Marcus began to see beyond just getting a degree. A path was emerging, one that might lead him far beyond what Mr. Whittaker had tried to limit him to. That night, he called his mother with new determination in his voice. "Mom, I think I've found my future." Marcus graduated from State University with highest honors, earning dual degrees in mathematics and computer science. At the graduation ceremony, his mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as he crossed the stage. Dr. Chen had come from Central Community College to watch her former student receive his diploma. "I'm so proud of you," his mother whispered, hugging him tightly after the ceremony. "We're just getting started," Marcus replied, thinking of the acceptance letter from MIT's graduate program that had arrived the previous week. Graduate school pushed Marcus harder than ever before. The work was challenging, but for the first time in his life, he was surrounded by people who valued his intelligence rather than questioning it. His research focused on developing algorithms that could identify patterns in large data sets, work that caught the attention of several tech companies before he even completed his degree. "Your approach is unique," his faculty advisor told him. "You're solving problems from angles most people don't consider. When traditional paths are blocked," Marcus explained, "you learn to find new routes." During his second year of graduate school, Marcus developed an algorithm that dramatically improved learning pattern recognition in educational software. His thesis presentation attracted representatives from major tech firms, all eager to offer him positions. "Silicon Valley is calling," his roommate joked as Marcus sorted through the job offers. But something didn't feel right about any of them. Late one night, while reviewing the proposals, Marcus remembered his conversation with Dr. Chen years earlier. "Perhaps you should change the system." The next morning, he called his mother. "What if I started my own company instead?" he asked. "I could develop educational software that helps students learn in different ways, especially those who get overlooked by traditional teaching methods." "That sounds exactly like something you would do," she replied, pride evident in her voice. With his graduate advisor's guidance, Marcus developed a business plan. He approached several investors with his idea for adaptive learning software that could identify and support different learning styles. Most were hesitant to back a young entrepreneur with no business experience, but Marcus's algorithms spoke for themselves. Finally, a venture capital firm specializing in educational technology agreed to provide startup funding. EduTech Solutions launched from a small office space near MIT with Marcus and 3 other programmers he'd met in graduate school. Their first product, Learning Path, used Marcus's algorithms to adapt to individual student needs. The software could recognize when a student was struggling with a concept and adjust the presentation method until it found an approach that worked. Think about how many kids get left behind because teachers only know one way to explain things. Marcus told a reporter during an early interview about the company. "Our software gives every student a chance to succeed." By the time Marcus turned 30, EduTech Solutions had grown to 50 employees. Learning Path had expanded from mathematics into science, reading, and language learning. Schools across the country were adopting their products, and the company had moved into larger offices in Boston. "We need to think about expansion," Marcus told his executive team during a strategy meeting. "Our mission is to reach students everywhere, especially in underserved communities." The team discussed various locations for a second office. When someone mentioned setting up in Marcus's hometown, he paused, memories of Mr. Whittaker and Westside High School flooding back. "Actually," he said slowly, "that might be perfect. We could partner with local schools for testing and implementation, bring our resources to students who need them most." That evening, Marcus called his mother, who still lived in the same apartment where he'd grown up. "Mom, I think I'm coming home, but not just for a visit. We're opening a new headquarters there." "That's wonderful news," she said. "Things are different now. People will see you differently." Marcus smiled. "I'm not coming back for their approval. I'm coming back to change things for the next generation." Little did he know that his return would bring him face to face with the past in a way he never expected. EduTech Solutions' new headquarters opened with great fanfare. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the hometown success who had returned to create jobs and investment in the community. The mayor attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, praising Marcus for remembering his roots. "This building used to be an abandoned warehouse," Marcus told the crowd gathered outside the newly renovated office. NAVA will help create educational opportunities for students everywhere. No one should be limited by where they come from or who their teachers are. Several people in the audience nodded in agreement, though they couldn't fully understand the personal meaning behind his words. After the ceremony, Marcus threw himself into establishing the new office. He hired local talent whenever possible, believing in giving opportunities to people from his community. The Human Resources Department handled most of the hiring process, but Marcus insisted on interviewing senior positions personally. Mr. Johnson, we have a final interview today for the Curriculum Development Director position, his assistant reminded him one morning. The candidate has over 20 years of teaching experience. Great, Marcus replied, scanning the day's schedule on his tablet. What time? 2 o'clock. His resume is in your email. Hours later, focused on a coding problem, Marcus almost forgot about the interview until his assistant knocked on his door. Your 2 o'clock is here, Mr. Richard Whitaker. Marcus froze, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. The name hit him like a physical blow. It couldn't be the same person, and yet, 20 years of teaching experience. The timing fit perfectly. Are you all right, sir? His assistant asked, noticing his reaction. Marcus composed himself. Yes, fine. Please send him in. He quickly opened the resume in his email. There it was in black and white. Richard Whitaker, former mathematics teacher at Westside High School. The very man who had tried to destroy Marcus's future was now sitting in his waiting room, seeking employment. The door opened, and Marcus turned to face his past. Mr. Whitaker looked much older than Marcus remembered. His once gray hair had turned white, and deep lines creased his face. He had lost weight, making his clothes hang loosely on his frame, but the wire-rimmed glasses were the same, as was the stiff posture. Thank you for seeing me today, Mr. Whitaker began formally, extending his hand before looking directly at Marcus. The moment of recognition was unmistakable. Mr. Whitaker's hand dropped, his face paling as he realized who sat before him. Marcus Johnson, he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a confession. Mr. Whitaker, Marcus replied evenly. Please have a seat. The older man lowered himself into the chair, visibly shaken. I had no idea. The newspaper article only mentioned the CEO's last name. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? Marcus said, his voice controlled despite the emotions churning inside him. Indeed it does, Mr. Whitaker agreed quietly. His eyes darted around the impressive office before returning to Marcus. I suppose you'll want me to leave now. Actually, Marcus replied, I'd like to hear about your interest in our curriculum development position. Your resume says you left teaching 3 years ago. Why? Mr. Whitaker's shoulders slumped slightly. Budget cuts. The district eliminated several senior positions. At my age, finding another teaching job proved difficult. Marcus nodded, remembering the news of school funding problems in his hometown. And why our company specifically? Your educational software is revolutionary, Mr. Whitaker admitted. After teaching for so long, I thought my experience might be valuable in development. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The man who had once claimed Marcus wasn't capable of advanced mathematics now wanted to work for the company built on Marcus's mathematical innovations. Mr. Whitaker, do you remember accusing me of cheating on the district math competition? The older man looked down at his hands. I remember many things I'm not proud of. Do you know what happened to me after that? Marcus asked quietly. I never followed up on your career after high school, Mr. Whitaker admitted. Marcus leaned forward. Perhaps we should discuss that before we talk about your potential employment here. Silence filled the office as Mr. Whitaker shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Outside the large windows, the city skyline stretched into the distance, a view that symbolized how far Marcus had come despite every obstacle. I had to take a very long road to get here, Marcus said, breaking the silence. Community college, night jobs, extra classes, all because my permanent record showed academic dishonesty concerns. Your words, Mr. Whitaker. The older man's face flushed with shame. I believed I was upholding standards. No, Marcus replied firmly. You saw a black student excel beyond your expectations, and you couldn't accept it. You tried to put me in what you thought was my place. Mr. Whitaker didn't deny it. He looked down at his worn briefcase, the leather cracked with age. "You're right," he said finally. "I had preconceptions. When you outperformed everyone, it challenged beliefs I'd held my entire life." Marcus studied the man before him, now elderly, desperate for work, his professional life in ruins. The power balance had shifted completely. "I should go," Mr. Whittaker said, rising slowly. "I apologize for wasting your time." "Sit down," Marcus said. "We're not finished." Mr. Whittaker sank back into his chair, confusion crossing his face. "Our company has a mission statement," Marcus continued, pointing to a framed document on the wall, "to create educational tools that serve AL students regardless of background, learning style, or circumstance." "A noble goal," Mr. Whittaker murmured. "I built this company because I know what it feels like to be written off by someone who should have been supporting me." Marcus leaned forward. "Do you know how many brilliant minds are lost because of teachers like you?" The question hung in the air between them. Mr. Whittaker's shoulders sagged under its weight. "Too many," he admitted finally. Marcus opened a folder on his desk. "Your qualifications for this position are actually quite strong. 25 years teaching advanced mathematics. Department chair. Curriculum development experience." Hope flickered across Mr. Whittaker's face, followed quickly by confusion. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I have a proposition for you," Marcus interrupted. EduTech Solutions has a new program starting next month. We're partnering with community centers to provide tutoring and educational support to underserved students. Mr. Whittaker listened intently as Marcus continued. "You could join our curriculum team with conditions. First, you'll complete our company's bias training program. Second, you'll spend 20 hours each month working directly with those community students. Third, you'll help us identify blind spots in traditional teaching methods." "You're offering me the job?" Mr. Whittaker asked incredulously. "I'm offering you a chance to be part of the solution," Marcus clarified, "to help build a system that doesn't leave kids behind because of assumptions about their potential." Mr. Whittaker's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Why would you do this? After what I did?" Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where he'd grown up, where other children were growing up right now, facing the same barriers he had. "Because this isn't about you or me anymore," he said finally. "It's about breaking cycles. What you did was wrong, but having you help fix the problem is more valuable than turning you away." He turned back to face his former teacher. "So, Mr. Whittaker, are you willing to learn from the student you once dismissed?" The older man stood with newfound resolve. "Yes, I am." They shook hands, not as equals, perhaps, but as two people connected by a painful past with the chance to create a better future. That evening, Marcus called his mother. "You'll never guess who I hired today," he began. After hearing the story, she was silent for a moment. "That's quite a full circle," she finally said. "Your father would be proud of the man you've become." Marcus smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, it's progress. As he ended the call, Marcus looked at the company logo on his wall, a path spiraling upward. He had transformed his pain into purpose, creating opportunities where once there had been only obstacles. And in doing so, he had become something Mr. Whittaker never expected. Not just successful, but magnanimous in his success.